Hello and welcome back to our Building an Online Shop in Rails series. I'm your host, Baylor Ray, and I am going to present to you today how to build your controllers and your routes in a Rails application. So since the last video, what I have gone ahead and done is created a seeds file so that we have some data to play with today. And so what I did is I just generated 100 products at random and pulled all the categories that come out of the Faker gem. And so everything here comes from Faker gem. If you go to the GitHub project, you can see this file and see how this works. It's pretty cool. So what we're going to do now is we want to have it where when we go to our application, we don't just see this, yay, you're on Rails message. We want to actually see our application start coming to life. And so what we're going to do for that is we're going to first of all generate a route. So Rails is very particular that if you want to go to pieces of the application, you have to define what's available to the end user. And so this is different than projects like .NET MVC, where that by default comes with a global route that says you can go to controller/action/ID. This concept can exist in Rails. By default, it does not. And so what we do is we have to define everything. And because we have no root route here, it means that Rails is not going to have, it's not going to try to load ours, it's just going to load this default help message. So what we can do is we can say our root goes to, and here we're going to pass in categories, waffle, and then index. And so this means that when we go to our application, the root is going to go to the categories controller for the index action. Now, when we refresh our page, this is going to say that the categories controller does not exist. And so we need to create that. And so to do that, what I think I'll do first is kind of show you the structure of the app folder. So something I haven't shown is when we created our Rails project, it gave us a bunch of folders. And so far, we've been playing around in the DB directory where we have our schema and all our migrations. What we're going to focus on today is inside the app directory, we have controllers and we have views. And the way this will work is we're going to define a controller file here. And then whenever we name our controller, so in this case, it's going to be categories controller, it'll be categories_controller. And then when we're looking for views, we're going to take that categories keyword and we're going to create a directory inside of here called categories. And so this will make more sense when we get there. Just remember that our controllers live inside of the controllers directory and our views live inside the views directory. So let's do that real quick. So I'm going to go in, when I'm in Vim, when I do things like this, when I edit a file, that happens down here. So I'm going to edit app controllers, and we're going to have a categories_controller.rb. So we're going to have a class here called categories controller, and this inherits from application controller. And application controller is a controller that ships with Rails by default. And if we take a look at that, this you can see it inherits from action controller base. So this is the root, absolute bare bones controller that ships with Rails. And by Rails does this, it defines that we protect from forgery. And what this means is that if basically it's just a CSRF prevention method that says that if somebody tries to post data to our application and we don't acknowledge that as being something we authorized beforehand, we reject it, and we reject that with an exception. So it's a big deal. It's a big no-no. Our application does not allow it. So by default, what you're generally going to do is you're going to have all of your controllers that you define inherit from this application controller. And this is a place that you'll put all your application-specific data that goes global. So what we've done now is we've defined our categories controller. If we refresh our page now, see now it says the action index cannot be found. So Rails is just never happy. That's what we take away from this? No, it means that we haven't done our job. And so what we want to do is define a method called index. And this is what Rails is calling an action. It's just MVC is just a class, right? The controller is just a class, and our actions are just methods. They just have a particular name. And so what happens here is we can go ahead and just get a result very quickly, we can say that we want to render out an HTML and just say that this is our page. And if we refresh, you can see now we have our message. And I think this is where we're going to call it, because this is, no, I'm just kidding, that's not true. This is not enough to satisfy anybody. This would not be good. Do not do this. If you have a job with Rails, do not show your superior officers that this is what you're doing. What we're actually going to do is we want to take information in the controller and we want to aggregate it together, and then we want to hand that off to the view to display to our user. And so the way you pass that data along in Rails is everything that is an instance variable in our class becomes available to us as an instance variable in our view file. And so let's build the view file first. I guess that's first. So we don't need this render anymore. Rails will by default try to render our view file. What we need to do now is edit in our app views, and we're going to make a directory called categories. And then we're going to define a file called index.html.erb. And we're just going to save that. And I'm just going to say, welcome to the view. And so now you can see this actually loaded. This is where we're going to the categories controller. We're hitting the categories index action. And then when this finishes its evaluation, then we load the view, or Rails does at least. We're not doing much. We're just sitting around twiddling our thumbs at this point, and Rails is doing all the hard work. And so what we want to do is pass data to this view. And so like I was saying, when we want to pass data, we define an instance variable. And in Ruby, those look like spirals. You'd say select spiral, and you can say like message equals hello. And then I'm going to put that in here. I'm just going to say print out our message. And you can see now we have hello to the view. So whatever we put in here becomes available to us as a spiral. It looks, I mean, it's very cool. With Ruby, you don't have like an object that you're passing down, and now you're doing dot notation. It's if you define a variable, you're going to use that exact same variable name down here. And this is part of the ERB. So you can see we have our ERB, or eRuby as Vim likes to put it. This is our embedded Ruby, and the way the syntax works here is that anything inside of this bracket, percent, anything inside of here gets evaluated as Ruby. And by putting the equals, that means we want to print that out. And so if I took that away, you can see now it just says to the view. If we put the equal back, now we have our hello message back. So let's actually send down real data. And the real data that we want to send down is our categories. So we'll define categories equals category.order by title. And that's because we want to order all our categories by title ascending, so they're in alphabetical order. And I'm going to put an H2 tag in here and say categories. And then what we'll do is we want to print these out on the page. And the way that'll work is this time we don't want to print, because what Rails will do, or Ruby will rather, is if we put the equals here, it would actually print. Well, let me show you first. We're going to write without the equals categories.each. And we're going to write out this to a variable called category. And what we're going to do is, I'm meant to wrap this in an ordered list. And inside of each list item, what we want to do is write out our category.title. So if we refresh, you can see now we have our categories heading, and we have all of the categories that are available in our system. And the way this works inside of Ruby is we don't want the percent here, because we're actually just we're opening a block here. And even if we put that in here, it's going to output out the array. Because that's what each does. Each returns back the array of data that it was iterating over, and we don't want to do that. So, and that also, if you notice, happens last. So what we want to do is we want to start an iteration over each of these categories, and we want to assign the value of each item to the variable category. And then when we're inside of this block, it'll evaluate this code, and it'll say we want to output a list item, we want to output the category title, and then when we close, and once this finishes, you can see Rails actually outputted the entire list of all our categories, or our embedded Ruby file did. And so what we can do here is we can also do some other cool things. We can put our category count here. And so we can say categories.count. And I forgot to do this. There we go. And we refresh. Error. This is wrong. There we go. You can see now that we're outputting the number of categories that we have up here. So we can do a whole lot with these instance variables because we're inside of Ruby here. So the last thing I think I want to do is this is going to push it to a slightly more advanced query on our category object. But we want to pull out the number of products in each of these categories. And this will serve us better later on because we don't, when these are generated, we don't know where their products actually are inside of here. So what we'll do is very simply just say that we have a category.products.count products. And if we refresh, you can see now we're outputting the number of products in each of these categories. Now, the downside of this particular implementation of this is that when we look at our SQL queries, you can see that we are just running through all the product categories for each of these categories. So this is bad. So to fix that, what we can do, and this is, like I said, it's a little bit outside the scope, but it's good for us to learn this anyways. We're going to say we want to joins on our products association. And so now if we go back and we scroll up to here, you can see now that we are creating an inner join on product categories to get the number of products for these categories. So we can start with that. And now we can say that we want to create a custom select. This is where it's getting a little bit out of scope, but we're going to say categories dot star because we want all the information about our categories. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say count our products.id as products count. And then I'm going to say group by our categories.id. We have to do that because this is an aggregate function. And the last thing I have to do is inside of this count, I have to change this to length. Otherwise, it tries to do a count inside of a count. And if we change this dot to an underscore, you can see it's the same result. And what's really cool about this is that Rails lets us define columns in a select query and use them as methods on our resulting objects. So very cool stuff here. And if we look at our results now, you can see we got by with a single SQL query to generate all of this. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you'd like to see more on any parts of Rails, let me know and I'll make a video on it. If you enjoyed this video or this series, please subscribe and like this video, and I'll see you next time.